The chains bit into Elira's wrists as she knelt in the center of the massive arena. Above her, thousands of alien spectators roared their bloodthirsty approval. Their voices a cacophony of clicks, hisses, and guttural calls that echoed off the crystalline walls of the Zephonian Colosseum. The twin suns of Xiphon Prime cast harsh shadows across the arena floor, making the blood-stained Eond shimmer like scattered rubies. Elira lifted her head defiantly, her violet eyes scanning the crowd with the same intensity that had once made her one of the Empire's most feared warriors. Her silver skin, marked with the traditional battle scars of her people, gleamed despite the shackles that bound her. She had been many things in her 28 cycles of life: a soldier, a hero, a daughter of Xiphon. But today she would die branded as a traitor. The charges against her were read aloud by a mechanical voice that echoed throughout the arena. She had refused to participate in the massacre of the peaceful Terran colonies. She had turned her weapon teeth against her own squadron when they began executing civilians. She had chosen compassion over duty, and in the Zephonian Empire, such choices were punishable by public execution. As the ceremonial executioner approached his plasma axe, humming with deadly energy, a series of explosions rocked the arena. The protective barriers flickered, and chaos erupted as a squad of unidentified fighters descended from the sky on stolen Imperial shuttles. Among them was Jack Harrison, a Terran soldier who had been captured during the Battle of Centauri Station 6 months ago. His dark hair was matted with sweat, his blue eyes filled with a determination that had been forged in the Mars of captivity. When his squad leader had identified the prisoner about to be executed, Jack had volunteered for what seemed like a suicide mission. He couldn't explain why, but something about the alien warrior's defiant stance resonated with something deep in his soul. The rescue mission was chaotic and brutal. Imperial guards fired plasma weapons into the crowd as Jack's team fought their way toward the execution platform. Civilians screamed and fled, while others cheered for the spectacle of violence, regardless of its source. Jack reached Elira just as an Imperial trooper raised his weapon to execute her where she knelt. Without hesitation, the Terran soldier put 3 rounds into the trooper's chest, then quickly worked to free Elira's bonds. "Who are you?" Elira demanded in accented standard, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species. "Someone who thinks you deserve better than this," Jack replied, pulling her to her feet, as energy blasts scorched the air around them. Their escape from the arena was harrowing. Jack's team had brought additional weapons, and Elira proved to be as deadly as the intelligence reports had suggested. Together they fought through waves of Imperial soldiers, making their way to the extraction point as the arena burned around them. But their freedom came at a cost. 3 of Jack's teammates died in the firefight, their bodies left behind, as the survivors fled into the maze of Xiphon Prime's underground tunnel system. As they ran through the ancient passages, Elira found herself wondering why these Terrans had risked so much for someone they didn't even know. The tunnels led to a hidden rebel base carved into the bedrock beneath the planet's surface. Here, a diverse group of aliens and humans worked together, united by their opposition to the Empire's brutal expansion. It was the first time Elira had seen her own people working alongside other species as equals rather than conquerors. Dr. Sarah Chen, the rebel movement's medic and one of their key strategists, treated their wounds and debriefed them on their successful but costly mission. She was a small woman with intelligent brown eyes and an air of quiet authority that came from years of saving lives under the worst possible conditions. Over the following days, as Elira recovered from her injuries, she and Jack found themselves drawn together by shared experiences of loss and betrayal. Jack told her about the destruction of his homeworld's major cities, how the Empire had turned entire planetary populations into slave labor. Elira shared her own story of growing disillusionment with the Empire's methods, how she had watched friends become monsters in the name of expansion. Their conversations revealed the depth of the Empire's cruelty. The Xiphonians had conquered 17 star systems, enslaving or exterminating entire species in their quest for galactic domination. The Terrans, with their relatively primitive technology, had lasted longer than most due to their tactical ingenuity and stubborn refusal to surrender, but they were losing the war. As days turned into weeks, Elira and Jack trained together, sharing combat techniques from their respective cultures. The Ziphonian style was elegant and efficient, emphasizing the use of energy weapons and personal shields. The Terran approach was brutal and adaptive, making use of whatever was available and turning disadvantages into strengths. Their partnership grew stronger with each mission they undertook. They sabotaged Imperial supply lines, rescued prisoners from the work camps, and gathered intelligence on enemy movements. But more than that, they began to care for each other in ways that neither had expected. Jack had spent years in military service, moving from battle to battle, with no real connection to anything beyond survival and duty. Elira's presence changed that. Her fierce dedication to justice inspired him, while her moments of vulnerability showed him that even the strongest warriors could need someone to lean on. For Elira, Jack represented something she had never found among her own people, someone who valued life over victory, who could show mercy without being seen as weak. His kindness was not a flaw to be exploited, but a strength that made him a better fighter, a better leader, a better man. Their relationship deepened during a particularly dangerous mission to infiltrate an Imperial research facility. Intelligence suggested that the Empire was developing a new type of biological weapon, something that could target specific genetic markers of different species. If deployed, it could wipe out entire populations without damaging infrastructure or resources the Empire wanted to claim. The facility was heavily guarded, protected by the Empire's newest automated defense systems, and patrolled by elite troops. Elira and Jack led a small team through a ventilation system that wound through the building's core, moving in perfect synchronization, born of countless hours of training together. They reached the main laboratory just as Dr. Kelvin Thrace, the facility's lead researcher, was conducting final tests on his biological weapon. The lab was filled with holding tanks containing various alien specimens, their bodies twisted and malformed by the experimental toxins. As they moved to plant explosives, they were discovered. The ensuing firefight was intense and desperate. Thrace activated the facility's security protocols, sealing blast doors and releasing security drones, while simultaneously trying to transmit his research data to the Imperial fleet. In the chaos, Elira was caught in an energy blast that shattered her personal shield and left her vulnerable. As Imperial soldiers moved in for the kill, Jack threw himself between them and her, taking a plasma bolt to the shoulder that spun him around and dropped him to his knees. The sight of Jack wounded because of her unleashed something primal in Elira. She fought with a fury that surpassed even her reputation, cutting through the enemy forces like a force of nature. Her movements were too fast to follow her blade work, precise and devastating. When the smoke cleared, Thrace was dead, his research destroyed, and the facility was collapsing around them. Jack was badly injured but alive, and Elira carried him through the falling debris to their extraction point. As they recovered from the mission, Elira realized that her feelings for Jack had grown beyond professional respect or simple attraction. She was falling in love with him, something she had never thought possible with a member of another species. The cultural barriers seemed insignificant compared to the connection they shared. Jack, despite his injuries, felt the same way. He had found in Elira not just a partner in battle, but someone who understood the weight of loss, the cost of war, and the value of hope in the darkest times. Their relationship became known within the rebel base, and while some questioned the wisdom of such attachments during wartime, most accepted it as a natural consequence of fighting together against impossible odds. Dr. Chen in particular encouraged them, seeing how their partnership strengthened both fighters. But their happiness was short-lived. Imperial forces, and following the trail from the destroyed research facility, discovered the location of the rebel base. The attack came at dawn, with Imperial dropships deploying thousands of troops, while orbital bombardment began collapsing the underground tunnels. The battle for the base was fierce and desperate. Rebels fought with the fury of those with nothing left to lose, while Imperial forces pressed their advantage in numbers and firepower. Jack and Elira fought side by side, covering each other's backs as they helped evacuate civilians and wounded rebels. As the base's defenses crumbled, it became clear that this was a battle they could not win. The order was given to evacuate, but many rebels stayed behind to buy time for others to escape. Jack and Elira were among the last to leave, ensuring that all wounded were evacuated before they allowed themselves to retreat. The escape took them to a network of hidden bases scattered across the system, places where rebels had been preparing for such an eventuality. But the loss of their main base was a devastating blow to morale and operational capacity. In the weeks that followed, the scattered rebel cells struggled to maintain coordination and effectiveness. Many of the surviving rebels were demoralized, ready to give up a fight that seemed increasingly hopeless. It was during this dark period that Elira and Jack made a decision that would change the course of the war. Intelligence had revealed the location of the Empire's main biological weapons facility, a massive space station called the Nexus that orbited Xiphon Prime. The station was where all biological research was coordinated, where the Empire's worst weapons were designed and tested. The plan they proposed was audacious to the point of madness. A small team would infiltrate the Nexus, plant explosives throughout the facility, and destroy it from within. The mission would almost certainly be a one-way trip, but it could cripple the Empire's ability to wage biological warfare for years to come. Despite opposition from many within the rebel leadership who argued that such a mission was suicide, Jack and Elira pushed forward with their plan. They knew the risks, but they also knew that someone had to act before the Empire deployed its new weapons against the remaining free worlds. The team assembled for the mission was small but skilled. Besides Jack and Elira, it included Marcus Webb, a Terran demolitions expert who had lost his wife and children in an Imperial attack; Zara Nightwhisper, a Valkyron assassin whose people had been enslaved by the Empire; and Kylith Ironscale, a Draconian warrior whose species had been the first to resist the Empire's expansion and still fought a guerrilla war on their occupied homeworld. The approach to the Nexus required careful timing and a great deal of luck. Using a captured Imperial transport, they joined a supply convoy heading to the station. Hidden in shipping containers among medical supplies, they waited as the convoy passed through multiple security checkpoints. The Nexus was a testament to Imperial engineering and cruelty. The station was divided into hundreds of research laboratories where scientists from dozens of species worked on projects ranging from new diseases to enhanced interrogation techniques. The very air in the station was monitored and controlled, laced with chemicals that would make any unauthorized personnel sick or compliant. Moving through the station's maintenance corridors, the team planted explosives at critical points throughout the structure. The work was careful and methodical. Each charge placed to maximize damage while avoiding immediate detection. But as they reached the central laboratory complex, their mission was discovered. A routine security sweep revealed one of their charges, and alarms began blaring throughout the station. Imperial security forces, including enhanced soldiers with cybernetic implants and combat drugs, converged on their position. The battle through the Nexus was a running firefight, through narrow corridors and across laboratory floors filled with horrific experiments. Jack took a blast to the leg that left him limping, while Elira suffered cuts from flying debris when an explosion brought down part of the ceiling. As they fought their way toward the station's power core, they lost teammates one by one. Marcus died when a security door slammed shut between him and the rest of the team, cutting him off as Imperial soldiers overwhelmed his position. Zara fell when she threw herself on a grenade to save the others, her final act one of sacrifice that saved the mission. Kylith fought like a demon, his natural armor and impressive strength allowing him to take wounds that would have killed a human or Xiphonian. But even he couldn't withstand concentrated fire from military-grade weapons, and he fell defending the entrance to the power core chamber. Jack and Elira reached the power core alone, wounded and exhausted, but still determined to complete their mission. As they began the final phase of their sabotage, Imperial troops surrounded the chamber. Among them was General Voss Thandir Alira's former commanding officer and the architect of many of the Empire's most brutal campaigns. "So the traitor shows her true nature at last," Thandir said, his voice carrying the weight of disappointment and disgust. "You could have been great, Alira. You could have stood at my side as we brought order to the galaxy." "Your order is built on the bones of innocence," Alira replied, her hands moving steadily to arm the final charges. "What you call peace is just the silence of the dead." Thandir drew his weapon, a ceremonial plasma-seized sword that had been in his family for generations. "Then you will join them." The battle between Alira and Thandir was as much a clash of ideologies as it was of blades. Thandir fought with the precision and ruthlessness that had made him one of the Empire's most successful generals. Alira fought with the fury of someone who had seen too much suffering, who had lost too much to the Empire's ambitions. While they clashed, Jack worked frantically to complete the sabotage of the power core. Imperial troops surrounded him, but his focus never wavered. He had found his purpose in this moment, in this sacrifice that might help save countless others from the Empire's biological weapons. As the power core began to overload, the station shook with increasing violence. Thandir and Alira's duel continued across the chamber, neither giving ground. But as the core reached critical levels, Thandir realized that the station was about to explode. In that moment of realization, Alira struck. Her blade found the gap in Thandir's armor, sliding between his ribs to find his heart. As he fell, she felt no triumph, only loneliness for what could have been. But the victory came at a cost. The overloading power core was about to explode, and there was only one escape pod left in the chamber. As Imperial troops fled or died in the expanding explosions, Jack and Alira faced a horrible choice. "Go," Jack said, pushing her toward the escape pod. "Someone needs to survive to tell the galaxy what happened here." "Not without you," Alira replied, trying to pull him with her. But Jack's injuries were too severe. The blast that had damaged his leg had also caused internal bleeding that was slowly killing him. He could barely stand, let alone make it to the pod. "I'm not leaving you," Alira insisted, but Jack had already made his decision. With strength he didn't know he possessed, Jack shoved Alira into the escape pod and activated the launch sequence. As the pod shot away from the disintegrating station, Alira screamed his name, pounding against the viewport as she watched the Nexus explode in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire system. The explosions of the Nexus sent shockwaves throughout the Empire. The loss of their primary biological weapons facility was a devastating blow, but the symbolic effect was even greater. The rebels had struck at the heart of the Empire's power and shown that even their most secure facilities were vulnerable. In the days that followed, rebellions sparked across dozens of worlds. The Empire's response was swift and brutal, but the damage was done. The image of Imperial invincibility had been shattered, and hope spread like wildfire through the oppressed populations of the galaxy. Alira was rescued by rebel forces and taken to a hidden medical facility where she spent weeks recovering from her injuries. But the physical wounds healed faster than the emotional ones. Jack's sacrifice haunted her, filling her dreams with images of his final moments on the exploding station. Dr. Chen, who had survived the attack on the main base, was among those who cared for Alira during her recovery. She understood the weight of survivor's guilt, having lost her own loved ones to the Empire's cruelty. He knew what he was doing, Chen told Alira one day as they walked through the facility's gardens. Jack made a choice to save you, not because he thought you were more important than him, but because he believed you could carry on the fight. But I don't know if I can, Alira admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see him pushing me into that pod. I hear his voice telling me to go. Then let that memory drive you, Chen suggested. Let it remind you why we're fighting. As Alira healed, the galaxy continued to burn. The Empire struck back at rebel strongholds with renewed fury, while resistance movements grew stronger and more coordinated. The destruction of the Nexus had delayed the deployment of biological weapons, but the Empire was adapting, developing new strategies and technologies to maintain their grip on power. Eventually, Elira returned to active duty, but she was changed. The easy confidence she had once possessed was replaced by a deeper resolve tempered by loss, but strengthened by purpose. She had learned that victory often came at the cost of those we love most, and that lesson made her both a better leader and a more careful protector of the lives under her command. Months passed, and the war continued its deadly dance across the stars. Elira led successful missions, rescued prisoners, and helped coordinate attacks on Imperial positions. But she never forgot Jack carrying with her a small piece of metal from his dog tags that had been recovered from the Nexus debris. The rebels scored other victories in the following year. They liberated entire systems, established free territories, and began building the foundation for a democratic galactic government. The Empire was forced to divert resources from expansion to holding their existing territories, and for the first time in decades, their borders began to shrink. During a mission to rescue prisoners from a labor camp on Zerion 4, Elira encountered something that changed her perspective on the war once again. Among the prisoners was a group of Imperial soldiers who had been captured after refusing orders to execute civilians. They had been court-martialed and sentenced to hard labor for their betrayal of Imperial values. Leading them was Commander Sarah Kane, a Zephonian officer who had served under General Thandir before her own crisis of conscience. She and her soldiers had been inspired by stories of the Nexus attack by the tale of an alien and a Terran who had sacrificed everything to stop the Empire's worst weapons. "You're her, aren't you?" Kane asked when she saw Elira. "You're the one who destroyed the Nexus with the Terran soldier." Elira nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. But Kane continued, "Your story gave us the courage to refuse our orders. When we saw what the Empire really was, we couldn't be part of it anymore." This encounter made Elira realize that Jack's sacrifice had rippled outward in ways neither of them had imagined. Their story had become legend, inspiring others to choose conscience over duty, freedom over oppression. As the war entered its 5th year, both sides were exhausted. The Empire still controlled vast territories, but their expansion had stopped. Countless worlds had gained independence, and many Imperial soldiers were defecting to join the rebellion. It was during this time that an opportunity presented itself that could end the war decisively. Intelligence revealed that Emperor Zeranis himself would be attending a gathering of sector governors on the neutral planet of Avalon Station. The station was heavily defended, but it represented the first time in decades that the Empire's leadership would be gathered in one place. The Rebel Council debated the plan for weeks. Assassinating the Emperor could end the war, but it could also create a power vacuum that might lead to even greater chaos. Some argued for a full assault on the station, while others preferred a surgical strike. Elira found herself appointed to lead the mission, a recognition of her skills and the symbolic weight her presence carried. As she prepared for what might be the final battle of the war, she thought often of Jack and the choice he had made on the Nexus. The approach to Avalon Station required all of Elira's strategic knowledge and the rebels' best equipment. They used a combination of stealth ships and diversion tactics, creating the appearance of attacks in other systems to draw Imperial forces away from the station. The infiltration team was larger than the one that had attacked the Nexus, but the challenges were greater as well. Avalon Station was protected by the Empire's most advanced defensive systems, and the Emperor's personal guard was composed of elite warriors from across the galaxy. As they moved through the station, Elira felt the weight of history pressing down on her. This mission could end the war that had consumed so much of her life, that had taken Jack and countless others. But it could also fail spectacularly, dooming the rebels and cementing the Empire's power for generations. The final assault took place in the station's Grand Hall, where the Emperor was holding court with his governors. As explosions rocked the station and rebel forces fought through the corridors, Elira and a small team made their way to the inner sanctum. Emperor Zeranis was everything she had imagined, tall, powerful, with the bearing of one who had never doubted his right to rule the galaxy. When he saw Elira enter the chamber, his eyes showed recognition and something that might have been respect. "So the famous traitor comes at last," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You've cost me greatly, Elira Starweaver, the Nexus, my governor's countless ships and soldiers. And you've cost the galaxy its freedom," Elira replied, raising her weapon. "This ends now." The battle that followed was unlike anything Elira had ever experienced. The Emperor was not just a ruler, but a warrior of immense skill enhanced by technology and combat drugs that made him faster and stronger than any normal being. His personal guards fought alongside him, creating a whirlwind of violence in the Grand Hall. As the battle raged, Elira found herself pushed to her absolute limits. She watched teammates fall, saw the Emperor's power firsthand, and felt the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on her. In that moment, she thought of Jack's final words, his belief that she could carry on the fight. With renewed determination, Elira pressed her attack. She used every technique she had learned, every tactical advantage she could find. When her weapons were destroyed, she fought with her hands. When she was wounded, she used her pain as fuel for her fury. In the end, it was not skill or technology that won the day, but sacrifice. As the Emperor raised his blade for a killing blow, one of Elira's teammates, a young Terran named David Park, threw himself between them. The blade that would have killed Elira instead pierced David's heart, but his sacrifice gave her the opening she needed. Elira's final strike was precise and decisive. The Emperor fell, his death sending shockwaves through the Imperial forces throughout the station. Without their leader, the Empire's will to fight crumbled and the station was secured. But victory came at a terrible cost. Many rebels had died in the assault, including David Park, whose sacrifice reminded Elira painfully of Jack's final moments. As she stood over the Emperor's body, she felt no triumph, only exhaustion and grief for all that had been lost. The war didn't end immediately with the Emperor's death. There were months of negotiations, power struggles within the Empire, and continued fighting as various factions tried to claim control. But the back of Imperial power had been broken, and eventually peace accords were signed that established the Galactic Federation. Elira found herself reluctantly thrust into a position of leadership in the new government. Her reputation as the hero of the Nexus and the one who had killed the Emperor made her a powerful symbol for the new order. But she struggled with the responsibilities of peacetime leadership, finding it harder to navigate political intrigues than military campaigns. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly healed from the wounds of war. New trade routes were established. Former enemy species began to cooperate, and the dream of a free and peaceful galaxy began to take shape. But for Elira, the peace was bittersweet. She had achieved everything she and Jack had fought for, but he wasn't there to see it. The galaxy was free, but at the cost of countless lives, including the one person who had meant everything to her. On the 5th anniversary of the Emperor's death, Elira stood on the observation deck of New Hope Station, the Federation's capital. The stars stretched out before her, each one representing worlds that were now free to choose their own destiny. Dr. Chen joined her at the viewport, her hair now gray with the passage of years, but her spirit still strong. "He would be proud, you know," she said softly. "Who?" Elira asked, though she knew the answer. "Jack, all of them. They would be proud of what you've built here." Elira nodded, touching the piece of metal from Jack's dog tags that she still carried. "Sometimes I wonder if it was all worth it. All the death, all the loss." "Freedom always comes at a price," Chen replied. "The question isn't whether it was worth it, but what we do with the freedom they died for." As if to illustrate her point, a group of children from various species ran past, playing together without the barriers of prejudice or fear that had once divided the galaxy. They were the first generation to grow up truly free, and their laughter echoed through the station like a promise of the future. In the years that followed, Elira gradually stepped back from public life, choosing to work behind the scenes, to ensure the Federation remained true to its founding principles. She established schools and hospitals, supported exploration missions to find new worlds, and worked tirelessly to prevent the kind of corruption that had destroyed the Empire. She never married, never found another love like she had shared with Jack. Some saw this as tragic, a hero unable to move beyond her past. But Elira saw it differently. She had been blessed with a love that transcended species culture and even death. She carried Jack with her in everything she did, honoring his memory through her actions. On quiet nights, when the weight of the past pressed heavily upon her, Elira would look up at the stars and remember. She would remember Jack's smile, his courage, his final sacrifice. She would remember all those who had died for freedom, and she would renew her commitment to ensuring their sacrifice mattered. The galaxy was not perfect. Peace was fragile, and there were always those who sought to exploit or corrupt. But it was free, and in that freedom lay the potential for something greater than any empire could achieve. It was a potential worth fighting for, worth dying for, and worth living for. As Elira aged, she became a living legend, a bridge between the war years and the new era of peace. Young people would seek her out, wanting to hear stories of the rebellion, of the days when freedom hung by a thread and heroes were forged in the fires of war. She would tell them about Jack, about his courage and his kindness, about how a Terran soldier and a Zephonian warrior had found love in the darkness of war. She would speak of the nexus, of the choice they made together, of the sacrifice that helped save the galaxy. But she would also warn them that freedom was not a destination but a journey. It required constant vigilance, constant effort, constant sacrifice. The Empire had fallen not because it was inherently evil, but because it had forgotten that power without compassion was meaningless, that conquest without respect was empty. In her final years, Elira returned to Ziphon Prime, now a member world of the Federation. The arena where she had once been scheduled for execution had been converted into a memorial for all those who had died fighting for freedom. At its center stood a statue depicting a Zephonian and a Terran standing together, their hands raised in defiance against oppression. Elira stood before the memorial on a warm afternoon, feeling the weight of her years, but also the satisfaction of a life well lived. She had kept her promise to Jack, had carried on the fight, had helped build the better world they had dreamed of. As the twin suns of Ziphon Prime set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Elira closed her eyes and let the memories wash over her. She remembered the fear in the arena, the explosion that had saved her life the first time she had seen Jack's face. She remembered their long talks in the rebel base, their growing understanding, their first kiss in the gardens of a liberated world. She remembered the passion and the pain, the hope and the heartbreak. But most of all, she remembered the love, a love that had transcended every barrier, that had inspired her to be better than she was, that had given meaning to every choice she had made since. The stars came out as darkness fell, and in their light, Elira saw the future spreading out before the galaxy, like an endless possibility. Somewhere among those stars, new heroes were being born, new loves were beginning, new sacrifices were being made. The galaxy was free, and it would remain free as long as there were those willing to fight for it, to love for it, to die for it. Jack's legacy, their legacy, would live on in every act of courage, every choice of compassion over conquest, every moment when love triumphed over fear. Elira smiled, feeling at peace for the first time in decades. She had done what she had promised Jack she would do. She had carried on the fight, had helped build a better world, had ensured that his sacrifice mattered. As she walked away from the memorial, she whispered a prayer to the stars, a promise that the freedom they had won would be protected, that the love they had shared would inspire others, that the peace they had fought for would endure. The galaxy turned on vast and free carrying. Within it, the dreams of all those who had dared to hope for something better. And in that turning, in that eternal dance of stars and worlds and peoples, the love of Elira and Jack burned on a light in the darkness that would never be extinguished. For love, true love, is immortal. It survives death, transcends time, and echoes through eternity. And in a galaxy freed by sacrifice and built on hope, that love had become legend, inspiring new generations to reach for the stars and dare to dream of something greater than themselves. The end was also a beginning, and in that paradox lay the true victory. The Empire had sought to conquer death itself to build an eternal dominion. But it was love that proved immortal, love that conquered death, love that built something truly eternal. The freedom to choose to grow, to become more than what you were born to be. And so the galaxy turned free, and full of possibility carried forward on the wings of sacrifice and the strength of love. The stars shone down on 1,000 worlds, on 1,000,000,000 dreams, on countless stories yet to be told. But among all those stories, one would always be remembered, the tale of Elira and Jack the warrior and the soldier who found love in the darkness of war and lit a flame that would burn forever in the hearts of all who loved freedom. Their story had become myth, their love had become legend, and their sacrifice had become the foundation of a new age. It was exactly what they would have wanted, not to be remembered as gods or saints, but as two people who had loved deeply and fought bravely for something greater than themselves. The galaxy was free, and it would remain so as long as their story was told, as long as their love was remembered, as long as their sacrifice inspired others to stand against oppression and reach for the stars. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything. That was immortal.